All right, welcome. The date of this video is July 17th. It is prior to the World Cup final, which is on July 19th. It is predicted that Argentina will win. It has been known since the beginning of the World Cup that Argentina would win this World Cup. And now it is also being predicted that Paul Simon, the famous singer-songwriter of Simon and Garfunkel, will slip and fall and injure his head 7 days after the World Cup. Okay, and his most recent album is 7 Psalms. But that's explained in another video. What I want to do in this video is really, once and for all, demonstrate how the conspiracy theorists are wrong. There is a massive phenomenon in our culture today where people are attributing these coincidences to something that they don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, that's part of what it is, right? A conspiracy theory is it's a vague they, and they can't even tell you, and that's the whole point. They can't tell you who it is. So they'll attribute these coincidences, and there are, as I'm going to show you in this video, these strange coincidences in this World Cup. But these people, like all of the other coincidences and there are thousands of them, they attribute them to a, who knows what, but a conspiracy theory. In other words, they attribute them to man instead of the true origin of these coincidences, which is clearly supernatural, and God. Specifically, the God of the Bible, the righteous Christian God of the Bible. Ironically, there are some quote-unquote Christians that are also recognizing these coincidences and still attributing them to man because they don't really understand what's going on either. So the purpose of this video is to make clear and to demonstrate what is really going on. And it is not enough of a prediction to prove the matter through simply predicting that Argentina will win the final cup, because obviously that's possible and it's not unrealistic. But what is unrealistic is the prediction that 7 days later, Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head. And that, people, make no mistake, will prove what I am saying in this video. And that is the purpose of this prediction for Paul Simon. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove to you to not listen to the conspiracy theorists and their explanations for these coincidences that are happening. No one, to my knowledge, is giving any credit to the true origin of these coincidences. In other words, this is the only channel that I am aware of that is attributing these coincidences to their rightful owner, the righteous Christian God of the Bible. And this includes even supposed so-called watchers, quote, Christians, quote unquote, attributing these things to the Illuminati or the Satanists. But hypothetically, although it isn't the case, but hypothetically, if the Illuminati were somehow behind these coincidences, or the Satanists, it would still be God, because Satan is an instrument of God. Okay, and so if Satanists were orchestrating this coincidence or these coincidences, it would still be God, but this isn't the case. There's no need. There's no evidence, furthermore, and there is no need to attribute these coincidences to anyone other than the righteous Christian God of the Bible. Those that don't believe in God can't fathom that, and those that do and still attribute them to man and these conspiracy theories, conspiracists, do not properly understand prophecy and how God uses prophecy, etc., and prophetic signs. Even some of them will claim to be watchers of prophetic signs and still not really understand what's going on. And the point of this video is to clear the matter up so that we can go forward from here. It's not to chastise, but to go forward from here, properly attributing these coincidences to what they really are, prophetic signs from God. Now, I'm just going to play this video. He'll do the part for me in explaining some of the coincidences, and I'm just really he has no idea. He's just scratching the surface. He has no idea. Much of this is explained in other videos on this channel. Let's just go ahead and play what he has to say.
So this is kind of shocking. Look at this. Yamal is 19 years old. Messi wore jersey number 19. Yamal wears jersey number 19. This picture of Messi and Yamal was taken a very long time ago, and now they're ending up playing each other in this World Cup. There are 19 days between their birthdays. The final is on the 19th, and the tarot card number 19, which, don't be messing with tarot cards, has the same details as the photo of the two of them and even shows the Argentine sun. I don't know, man. That's pretty crazy. We're going to be discussing the full legitimacy of the World Cup and how it's not rigged at all on my Rumble live stream channel, which is free to download, free to watch, and free speech. If you want to tune in, click the link in my bio, come to Rumble, or comment the word Rumble below and check your DMs. Once you get the link, make an account, follow me there, and turn on live notifications so you know when I'm live.
All right, now I'm going to play an audio recording that I recorded for a friend of mine who sent me this video on WhatsApp this morning. And so rather than just repeat myself, I'm just going to play for you the recording that I explained to my friend regarding this. And then I'll be back after that to explain a few more things.
Hey, good morning, bro. Yes. Everything in this video I already knew, except I hadn't noticed that in the tarot card is the sun of the Argentine flag. Yeah. But anyway, that was the thing that I was offering to tell you earlier, but you weren't interested. So I want to tell you a couple of things that's going on here. First of all, this guy and other guys that know this information are not understanding what's going on. They don't understand why these coincidences. Why do they not understand? Because they don't know the God of the Bible. And so, because they don't understand, they attribute it to some who knows what. Well, they think they kind of know, but they don't really know. And they'll say they don't really know, but they attribute it to some kind of conspiracy theory. And that's why in the same video he talks about the World Cup being rigged. Because, as he said sarcastically, tongue-in-cheek, come follow me on my other channel where we talk about how the World Cup is not rigged. As if what he had just been saying in this video is evidence that it's rigged, etc. In other words, for the godless, and anyone without the God of the Bible is godless, according to my worldview, right? The Christian worldview. So the explanation is always with these sorts of things is a conspiracy theory of some kind. Okay? And that those behind it are the Illuminati or something, right? The Satanists, although these people don't believe in Satan because they don't believe in the God of the Bible. I mean, how can you believe in Satan and not the God of the Bible, right? That's a contradiction. That's not to say that people by nature think clearly, because they don't. It's human nature. God designed that. But still, it's a contradiction. Anyway, so what's his explanation here? He has no idea what's going on, except to just conclude that this is more evidence of how everything is rigged and there's a conspiracy theory. They refuse, and here's the thing, they refuse to acknowledge the God of the Bible. They refuse to attribute these things to God, because there is no God. I mean, the title of his channel and who he is says it right there. Connecting consciousness, right? He's a New Ager. There's no personal being God doing this. It's the Illuminati. Anyway, this is very typical. I mean, this happens. I mean, there are all kinds of, thousands of examples of these coincidences being misinterpreted by these guys who are actually paying attention to these coincidences and talking about them. Good morning, Sorry Cup. But they have no idea what's going on. Okay, so what is going on? Well, it's related to, for example, how there were 2 earthquakes in Venezuela on June 24th that were over 7 magnitude, but currently the death toll is about 40,000, I think, or no, sorry, 4,000 or so. But it could be really high. It's going to get higher. So anyway, but the 2 earthquakes on June 24th in Venezuela that were both 7 magnitude, one was 7.2 and one was 7.5. The 2 and the 5 give us another 7, which gives us 3 sets of 7, which is what the Israelites symbolically enacted before the walls of security of ancient Jericho collapsed in God's judgment due to an earthquake. Okay? And archaeology proves in Israel today that the walls of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. Anyway, and that's secular archaeology, by the way. So these 2 earthquakes were 39 seconds apart. And they occurred on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday. Yeah. So what's with that? These guys wouldn't be able to tell you. And that's probably why this guy on his channel isn't talking about it. Because how can you attribute earthquakes to the Illuminati and a conspiracy theory and the World Cup being rigged, etc. So the reason why there were the 2 earthquakes 39 seconds apart on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday is because Lionel Messi and Argentina are going to win their 2nd World Cup in a row. And where will it be played? In New York, where on 9/11, 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart, as in 39 seconds apart. That's why going into the tournament, Lionel Messi had 911 career goals. That's right. That's why also the 2 jersey numbers that Lionel Messi has worn in World Cup games are 19 and 10. which hints at 9/11. 1, 2 ones and a 9. Lionel Messi's son, which is the purpose of this coincidence with the son, the birth, the baby. Okay, Lionel Messi's got a viral image of him bathing the other 19-year-old player who also wears 19. Okay, but in this cup, Lionel Messi will wear 10, and the other player will wear 19 for another 9/11. Okay, but this points to Lionel Messi's son, who was born exactly on the date 9/11, exactly 11 years after 9/11. Why 11 years? Because of Flight 11, the first plane, which had a crew of 11, and flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union. And that's because Jesus coined the phrase, the 11th hour, which referred to the last, which is an idiom in the English language, but in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness. In the English language, the 11th hour is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out. Before what? Judgment, darkness, the Antichrist, who was born in Argentina, Pope Francis. And you're like, well, Francis is dead. Well, no, he will be resurrected from the grave with through demonic power in 2029. Anyway, there's lots more to the story, which I have been documenting in videos. Also, God uses records for signs. In the first game of this World Cup, Lionel Messi set the new record for most goals in a World Cup with 17. Because the two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart, and Lionel Messi in this World Cup is going to win his second World Cup in a row, and it'll be in New York. The dogs are saying hi. Anyway, the 17 also connects with the number 11. The reason why the two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart is because the two space shuttle disasters, if you know about them, because they were before your time a little bit, they were almost exactly 17 years apart, and they're commemorated every year on the same day because of it, because of their timing. And the reason why the two space shuttle disasters were 17 minutes apart is because it points to Apollo 17, which was the last mission to the moon. The last time an American was on the moon. The moon symbolizes Christ. It's a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. Also, the sun symbolizes God the Father, whose light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important, and it symbolizes watching for the timing of the arrival of Christ through signs, prophetic signs like this, including moon signs. And so The last time an American was on the moon symbolizes, or the departure of the last American on the moon symbolizes America's departure from Christ. Now, what's very interesting regarding Lionel Messi here and Argentina is that Madonna is scheduled to do the halftime show. The first ever, and God uses firsts for signs. Maradona is going to do the halftime show. The most famous soccer player in history and in World Cup history was Maradona for Argentina. Madonna starred in the movie Evita, which was released exactly 24 years after the last American on the moon. Evita is about Eva Perón, the wife of the socialist dictator in Argentina. Okay, which then led to the Dirty War and 30,000 people getting killed in a politicide. Obama, the 44th president, visited the monument for the Dirty War in the year 4x4, come to think of it, on the 40th anniversary, after he had just been in Cuba, praising Cuba, socialist, communist Cuba, because Barack Obama is a communist. He's deceived the masses because the mainstream media is politically left and they are evil and did not do their job in vetting Obama because America just wanted to elect a black president so badly, instead of, like the left always does, choosing righteousness over power, because from the left it's all about power. It's not about right or wrong. It's all about power, and whoever has the more power is the one that's in the wrong. That's the left. They're not interested in righteousness, which is the characteristic of the God of the Bible, which is why the left isn't into the God of the Bible, including, no offense, but people on the consciousness revolution side, because that's why they're there. They, in general, don't really like the idea of sin, and they don't like righteousness and unrighteousness. They don't like that concept. So that's why the Indian religion is more appealing. Fundamentally, that's what it is all about. But anyway, yeah, so it's all pointing to Barack Obama as well, is my point. The two antichrists. That's why the two earthquakes. And Messi winning 2 in a row for Argentina. Now, there's also a prophecy in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, about the woman who rides the beast, the harlot, the prostitute that rides the beast. Well, Madonna is obviously the harlot. She represents the harlot. She's the prostitute. And coincidentally, she's famous for her love of horseback riding. And God has also used signs involving Madonna riding a bicycle. So she's the woman the harlot who rides the beast. Well, this metaphor in the prophecy is a metaphor for the Vatican and the Pope riding the beast, which is the European Union, and the political system that Rome will be the head of, just like it was at the beginning of the age, at the time of Christ's death. You know, it's all full circle. And in the end, just like in the beginning, Rome will persecute true Christians, as they did in Rome in the Colosseum. I'm sure you know, right? With the bestiary, they were throwing the Christians to the lions. Well, that's the same sort of thing. The Pope and Catholicism isn't Christianity, right? And so they will persecute, the Pope and Obama will persecute true conservatives and Christians in a politicide. That's what's going on. That's what's being communicated through all of this World Cup. There's way more than what I've just been talking about. But let's see. That's probably enough. The 9/11 also points to Revelation 9/11, which is about King Apollyon rising from the bottomless pit. But I'll leave it there because I could just go on and on, because I could talk about how on 9/11 that was symbolized with the fourth hijacked plane that killed 44 people, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh in a 40-acre pit because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle. And that all points to Obama, the 44th president. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. So anyway, that's my response to this video.
All right. Now, I posted this video yesterday on July 17th, and I'm going to repost it again on the 18th because I'm going to insert this next few minutes into the video that wasn't in the other video. I'm not going to take down the other video because it's still time-stamped for the 17th, and we want that to still stay that way. But there's some very important additional information. In fact, arguably, it's the most important information, which is why I need to include it into this video. I don't want to make a whole separate video just for this extra bit of information. Now, as I was explaining, this image here that's gone viral of Lionel Messi bathing the baby Lamine Yamal, the star player for Spain. This big coincidence. When Lionel Messi was 19 years old, and now currently this Yamal guy is 19 and he wears the number 19, and so did formerly Lionel Messi wear number 19 in other World Cups. Okay, everything that I've explained, and I will explain more. The coincidence here between the sun, okay, the sun on the tarot card, the 19th tarot card, and the sun on the Argentine flag. This image hints at Lionel Messi's son, S-O-N. Okay, because Lionel Messi, obviously, as a father, would have been doing this with his son, S-O-N. This S-U-N, son, is a play on this. God is doing a play on words here, which he frequently does, by the way, in the Bible. Do play on words. And so it points to Lionel Messi's son. And as I mentioned, Lionel Messi's son was born exactly 11 years. He was born on the date 9/11, exactly 11 years after 9/11, when Flight 11 crashed into the Twin Towers with a crew of 11, and the Twin Towers looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state to join the Union. The flights, by the way, departed Boston, the spiritual founding of America, when 11 ships in John Winthrop's 11-ship flotilla arrived and founded the Boston, Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's also why the 11 here. It all points back to the spiritual founding of America, which was founded in God and Christ. Plymouth Rock. Rock being symbolic of Jesus in the Bible. Okay, so it all points to the son of Lionel Messi. Why? Because Messi and the name Lionel also hint at God's son, S-O-N, the Messiah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Lionel Messi. This is huge. The second person of the Trinity, come to think of it. Lionel Messi will win the second in a row World Cup for Argentina. And it will be in New York, where the two twin towers were crashed into by two planes. Okay? So all of this, in other words, points to the Son of God, the Messiah, Lionel Messi. The second World Cup win will point to Psalm chapter 2. And what I'm going to do is read the relevant verses here in Psalm chapter. I'm going to actually read the whole chapter. Psalm chapter 2 is what God is pointing to with the second World Cup win for Lionel Messi and Argentina. Psalm chapter 2. The reign of the Lord's anointed. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of by the way, I should just preface this. This was written 1,000 years before Christ. The book of Psalms in the Old Testament and the Bible, we know was written 1,000 years before Jesus Christ. But it's also written for our time right now, when the world is in the process, increasingly, of ganging up on Israel, leading to a climax in which the world will about to destroy Israel, and the Jews finally call upon Jesus by his name to save them, as described in the book of Zechariah. And Jesus also said that he would not return until they call upon him by his name. And then the enemies of Israel will be destroyed. And then Lord Jesus Christ will rule from Jerusalem in the 1,000 years of peace. So this is also what this is a prophecy. Psalm chapter 2 is a prophecy for the end. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. Let me just interject. When people come against Israel, they are coming against the Lord and his anointed. They are coming against Jesus. It is the spirit of Antichrist. They know it. They just don't maybe know it consciously, but they know it. And when they die, they will not be arguing. They will not be debating. They will know it. And they will know that they are guilty. And they know it now, but they won't admit it. They are in rebellion against God. It's all spiritual. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. He's laughing at these nations that think of the way they do about Israel and peoples. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. For those people that use the word Zion in a derogatory way, as if it's some wicked, evil thing to be a Zionist. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Psalm chapter 2, Lionel Messi's son, the photo of Lionel Messi and the baby, bathing like he would his son. The Lord said to me, the Lord is speaking. To someone, you are my son, capital S. Today I have begotten you. For those Jews who still have not recognized that Jesus is their Messiah, and for Islamists that claim that God can't have a son. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. Speaking of the messianic age that's coming. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Be warned which way you go regarding Israel. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. What I can tell you is that out of necessity. Israel is going to nuke the regime in Iran. It will have no choice. Tehran is going to be nuked, and the nations are going to rage. And as far as I can tell right now, this will happen on January 3rd, 2027, exactly 12 times 2 weeks after the World Cup. 12 times 2 hints at 122, which is the equivalent in simple English gematria of the name of the Antichrist, Pope Francis, who will be resurrected through demonic power in 2029. Him being the anti-nuclear weapon Pope. 1 week later, though, it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall on July 26th, 2026. This is 7 days. Paul Simon's most recent album is 7 Psalms, for which he was instructed to make through a heavenly voice in a dream, which he tells everyone about. So from the Psalm chapter 2 sign, which is the World Cup, and it is the 23rd World Cup, it is then 7 days to the predicted fall of Paul Simon and injury of his head, after which he will go into a vegetative state. And there will be a sound of silence around Paul Simon, an allusion to Revelation chapter 8, which is the sound of silence heard in heaven before the judgments, the 7 trumpet judgments on the world. Including the destruction of ships, which is a parallel with Isaiah chapter 23. That's getting off the subject here. From the fall, the predicted fall of Paul Simon, who is Jewish, it is exactly 23 weeks to the predicted day that Israel will nuke Iran. And this will be 7 days after the 23rd World Cup. All right, one more thing that I want to add, which is a separate subject. I want to be more empathetic to those who are recognizing these coincidences but are attributing them either to the Illuminati or Satanists and or Satan. There's no reason to believe that, well, I'll just say it. Satan is not orchestrating these signs and these coincidences. Satan does not demonstrate signs. He's not in the business of communicating signs. And these signs are certainly not for what these people would suggest is the reason or motivation for supposedly Satan to do this, which is to brag or something, because they don't understand the signs. They don't understand these things, so they think it's Satan or the Satanists and the Illuminati, etc. But I want to say I don't appreciate that, but I understand why they reach these conclusions, because they can clearly see there's something supernatural. If it's not supernatural, they'll say, well, there's some grand conspiracy going on in the world. But they understand that it's something huge. And so the reason why they think Satan is because these signs are extremely dark. I mean, this is really dark stuff here. This channel and God's signs is very, very dark. But it's all how you look at it. Because it doesn't help. Okay, the signs are dark, but it certainly doesn't help to conclude that Satan is involved in everything here. And it's not true. These signs are warnings from God. They're from God, and therefore you can take comfort in that. God has designed a world where bad things happen. There's a bigger plan going on. God is in control, and that includes the bad things. There's a reason for all of what is going on, including these very, very dark things. And God is in control of these signs. These signs are from God. Yes, I understand they're very dark, and so you would like to attribute them to Satan. If there's just for example, if there's a death toll of a mass shooting, and that number is prophetic, it's from God. I know how dark that is, but it's true. It's not from Satan. None of these signs are from Satan. And I have the authority to tell you this. I know far, far more than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction for Paul Simon. And it is to prove to you what I am saying. This is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. We can see now how important this is because everyone is assuming that these signs are from Satan. And as far as I know, I'm the only one saying, no, they are not. And I and those who collaborate with me know more than anyone really what is going on with the signs. The proof of that is the prediction for Paul Simon. By no means am I saying that there are others that know some things that I don't and that I don't learn. I'm not saying that. But God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. And I know the reason why. It's to prove to you these things. Okay, so I just played for you the recording that I made for my friend after he sent me this video. One thing that I didn't fully explain to him is the significance of the exact 24 years from the release of the movie Evita about Eva Peron, the wife of the socialist dictator Juan Perón, which identifies Obama as the dictator, the future dictator of America. So the reason for the 24 years is that it is 8 + 8 + 8 years from the last departure of an American from the moon, and the moon symbolizes Christ, and the name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. So that's why the exact 24 years there. Now, there was an eclipse exactly 24 years after the release of the movie Evita on December 14th, 2020. Okay, that eclipse went over Argentina and over Buenos Aires, which is where the Antichrist is from. The first of the two Antichrists, Pope Francis. That prophetic eclipse is amazing. Because it's now properly understood. Because the reason why I say that is because it's now only understood. Because that eclipse occurred on December 14th, 2020. So just to be clear though, we have the movie Evita, which is about Argentina, right? And then another exact 24 years to this eclipse. All right. Now that eclipse over Argentina was on the day, December 14th, 2020, that the first American, as in the last American to depart the moon, which symbolizes Christ, it was the day that the first American took the VACCINE, which is the mark of the Antichrist. And it was the mark of the Antichrist in its current form, or is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It was not a supposed quote-unquote precursor to the mark of the Antichrist, speaking to those quote-unquote Christians that believe that is the case. And the prediction in this video will prove this. That's the purpose of this prediction that is from God, to make no mistake. Specifically, the prediction for Paul Simon, because I realize the prediction for Argentina isn't really much. And so, we have clearly identifying the Pope related to the mark of the Antichrist, the VACCINE, on that day. Now that day, December 14th, speaking of eclipses, was the midpoint. It was the midpoint day of the Feast of Hanukkah, but it was also the midpoint of the eclipses over America. The one on August 21st, 2017, the Great American Eclipse, the first eclipse to pass over America and only touch America since 1776, the year America was founded. And the eclipse on April 8th, 2024, that also went over America, but in a perpendicular path, thereby engendering a massive giant X over the map of America. In God's signs, an X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. And what are X's? They are two lines that cross each other in their middles. The two eclipses crossed each other in the middle, and the middle date was December 14th, 2020, which was the date of an eclipse over Argentina. And now I have just proven that it points to Pope Francis because it connects to the release of the movie Evita, which was, and Evita and Eva was portrayed by Madonna, who is going to perform the halftime show in the Argentina World Cup. Now that date of the World Cup, July 19th, 2026, is 9 times 227 days after the eclipse over Argentina on the day that the first American took the mark of the Antichrist. The reason why that's relevant is because the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. And the VACCINE, mark of the Antichrist, is God's judgment. The Antichrist is God's judgment. So it's 9 times 227. Well, 227 is the 49th prime number, or the 7 times 7th prime number. So in other words, it's 9 times 7 times 7th prime number of days between that eclipse over Argentina and the predicted win of Argentina with the halftime show of Madonna, which will point back to Maradona for Argentina in the World Cup exactly 40 years earlier. Well, not necessarily exactly, but in that World Cup, I'm just going to tie it all up here. In that World Cup in 1986 with Maradona, he scored against England, and Argentina just beat England to go to the finals. It's a repeat of history. It's a pattern God is establishing here. Maradona, player number 10, and Lionel Messi wears number 10. Maradona scored the most famous goal in all of soccer history, arguably, but for sure in World Cup history, nicknamed the goal of the century, which is when he dribbled the ball past 5 England players and scored a goal. The goal of the century, where he beat 5 players. Pope Francis, when he will be resurrected from the dead as predicted, will become the 5th Pope of the century. That's why 5 players and the goal of the century, and the 5th Pope of the century, Pope Francis, when he replaces Pope Leo when he becomes resurrected from the dead through demonic power. Now, 9 times the 7 times 7th prime number hints at the number 977, which gives us the word in the Bible, in the New Testament, that's only used once in the verse about the 5 loaves of bread that Jesus was involved, the miracle that Jesus was involved with when he was feeding the masses with, and there was 5 loaves of bread in this verse. This verse contains this word to consume, to become one with. which alludes to becoming one with the mark of the Antichrist and thereby Satan. So we got this one usage, only one, in this one verse. Okay, and it's about 5 loaves, as in the 5 players, as in the 5th Pope of the century, as in the 5 players in the goal of the century, Maradona, Madonna. The Madonna halftime show will be 977 days before the date 322, March 22nd in 2029. God is using this pattern of 3 and 22 to hint at Genesis 3:22, which symbolizes what will be promised through the mark of the Antichrist, which is eternal life, the defeat of aging without God, through transhumanism technology. This will be promised by the demons, pretending to be aliens. And through this mark, which is already the mark, don't be confused. And the prediction proves this, and I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction. I hope that's very clear. And so 977 days. So from the eclipse that was over Argentina on the day of the first American taking the thing, we have 9 times the 7 times 7th prime number of days to the Madonna halftime show and Argentina's win in the World Cup, which will point to Pope Francis, who was born in Argentina. And then from that date, another 977 days, which again hints at the 5 loaves and is ultimately hinting at the 5th Pope of the century. But the reason for it pointing first to March 22nd, 2029, because the Pope won't be resurrected until May 2nd, 2029. March 22nd, 2029, 322, which hints at Genesis 322. And that's another, speaking of this video about conspiracy theorists, the conspiracy theorists recognize frequently this pattern that God is doing regarding this 3 and 22 number, yet they attribute it to conspiracy theorists, to the conspiracists. And what I am saying is that no, God is in control of all of this, and it is God that is doing and demonstrating and making this pattern of 3 and 22, not the Illuminati. And so it is predicted that on March 22nd, 2029, there will be a massive Mary apparition in Latin America, Argentina, the earthquakes in Venezuela, etc., on the beach in Rio de Janeiro, where Madonna performed the record-setting concert on the beach. She did the concert to celebrate her 40th career year. Maradona scored the goal of the century 40 years before Madonna's halftime show. To celebrate her 40th career year, she did the concert, the free concert on the beach in Rio, which attracted 4 times 0.4 million people. In other words, 1.6 million, which hints at 16 and 4 times 4, which hints at the 44th president, the second of the 2 antichrists who will get his power from the resurrected Pope Francis, according to Bible prophecy. There will be a massive Mary apparition, which will be a demon pretending to be Mary, as have been all Mary apparitions in all of history. All of them. They are designed to fool Catholics because Catholics, sorry to say, most of them, the vast majority of them have no idea what their faith is about. They do not know the Bible. In fact, for a long time, Catholics were forbidden from reading the Bible, and that culture has still maintained itself. If they ever have a question or something, they go to a priest. They don't read the Bible. They don't understand the gospel. And when you read these quotes from these so-called Mary apparitions, the quotes have been recorded. You can go read them. Anyone who understands the New Testament and the gospel can clearly see that they are demons fooling people. And what is the number one way in which Catholics are fooled? It is through Mary. But Mary, what is she doing? As evidenced through the Mary apparitions. She's encouraging them to take pieces of bread for their salvation, to consume them, as in the 5 loaves of bread, as in becoming one with the mark of the Antichrist once it's consumed, and thereby becoming one with Satan. I once met and became friends with, briefly, a lady when I was traveling in Spain who confided in me a story about when she and her friends were in a cathedral, her Catholic friends, and witnessed one of these pieces of bread that the Catholics take for their salvation levitate off the table. And I have no reason to doubt her. I completely believe that that would happen. In fact, I'd be surprised if it didn't happen. Catholics, a big part of why they believe and why they are Catholics is because of the constant supernatural experiences that they are experiencing. And as the Bible says, people get the deception they ask for. Currently, the world, for example, is asking for the deception of aliens because they believe in the possibility of aliens, which, if you are a true Christian, is impossible, because God became a man and died for the sins of men and did not hopscotch around the universe dying on crosses for other alien beings. It's impossible. But anyway, that's why there'll be aliens. That's another subject. But regarding this piece of bread that levitated off the table, it makes perfect sense that that would happen because they get the deception they ask for. When you worship Mary and you worship the piece of bread, the demons are going to make the piece of bread levitate off the table. I jumped ahead. Let me backtrack. There are only 2 explanations for how the piece of bread could have levitated off the table. 1, angels were levitating the piece of bread off the table in order to encourage them to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. Or 2, a demon was levitating the piece of bread off the table in order to encourage them to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. Okay, so the Mary apparition will be a massive thing. It'll be worldwide. The whole world will see it on March 22nd, 2029. It perfectly connects with Madonna. And Madonna is a word that is related to Mary. So you have the connection here of just, the 9 times 7 times 7th prime number and then the 977 days, as I just explained. Now, one more thing to just add that was learned today. The twin earthquakes, the twin towers, the earthquakes that were 39 seconds apart on Lionel Messi's 39th birthday, they identify Rome because the symbol of Rome, or the mythology of the origin of Rome, is this statue, the Capitolini statue of the wolf. The mythology is the wolf and the 2 pups suckling on her udder. Okay, and this is the statue that represents Rome, if you didn't know. This is the symbol of Rome. In fact, it's believed that the etymology of the name Rome comes from this. In other words, from the Etruscan word for udder. Well, it's 2 pups that are nursing at the wolf. And they are twins. That's right. Pope Francis, the Pope in Rome, from Argentina, the two earthquakes 39 seconds apart on the 39th birthday of the Argentine player who will win a second World Cup in a row. As in the two earthquakes, as in the twin pups in the symbol for Rome. One last thing too, speaking of the symbolism of Rome, Rome is also nicknamed the Eternal City. That's also prophetic because, as I've just explained, the promise from the mark of the Antichrist will be eternal life. The big lie from Genesis chapter 3, the lie that began the fall when the serpent deceived Eve in the garden. Speaking of Eva and Evita, Eve was deceived in the garden when the first lie ever told by the serpent to man was, "You shall surely not die." That's the big lie that began the age and will end the age. You shall surely not die. It is true, you shall surely not die, but it is only through the power of God to become resurrected like Lord Jesus Christ. The first man to have eternal life. And we can have eternal life also if we follow him. And where did he go? He sacrificed his life in order to live eternally. He said, for example, one needs to, like a kernel of wheat, go into the ground and die first before it can then sprout and grow into a plant and produce fruit. And so I'll leave it at that. Oh, and one more thing too. This is the reason for the sun coincidence. This sun that's on the tarot card that hints at this whole coincidence here, because the 19th tarot card, don't ask me why God is using tarot cards, but it's not the Illuminati. This is the same image that's in the sun on the Argentine flag. And that's because of the eclipse connection that I've just mentioned. Okay, that's it for this video, I think. God bless. Okay, so the world really is focused on this image. And I'm talking about the mainstream culture is focused on this photo that was taken by chance. Okay, so the story is that there was a photographer who was making a calendar using the players for the Barcelona Spain football team, and each player had in the calendar one of the months. And Messi got January, and the night before the photo with Messi, the photographer was inspired with this idea that he would bathe a child, because the calendar had something to do with children. All right, and this baby was chosen by chance. This was when I first learned about this image, I assumed that Messi knew the parents or something. But no, this baby was just chosen by chance. The mother was selected in a draw or something like that. So it's pretty crazy. Now, again, the true reason for this coincidence from God, contrary to what the conspiracy theorists will say, who knows what they really are saying anyway, they don't really know what to say. But the true reason for this is that God is pointing to the son, the baby of Lionel Messi, who he would have bathed, who was born exactly 11 years after 9/11. He was born on the date 9/11. Messi came into the tournament with a career 911 goals, this year's World Cup. The two jerseys Messi wore in the World Cup in history were 10 and 19, which gives us 9/11. Currently, Messi is wearing number 10, and this Lamine Yamal player who Messi was bathing at the age of 19, now this player wears number 19. So in this game, in this final match, Messi will wear 10, and the baby who is now 19 years old, will wear number 19. Another 9/11. Now, God uses records for signs. Messi now has the record most number of goals in the World Cup. He scored his 19th goal in World Cup history, a record-setting 19th goal in the 80th minute of the game. Lionel Messi was born exactly 80 days before 9/11 in 2001. And again, all of this is pointing to the second World Cup that Lionel Messi will win in a row that will be played in New York, because it'll point to the two planes that struck the two towers on 9/11. They were 17 minutes apart. The record-setting goal that Lionel scored, the first one in this World Cup tournament, was the 17th goal. So that's the reason. So the world is really talking about this image of the baby and Lionel Messi, but the true reason is that God is pointing to Lionel Messi's son, who was born exactly 11 years after Flight 11 crashed into the two towers on 9/11, which is why Lionel Messi will win his second World Cup in a row in New York. All right, I just read a news article talking about how the Lamine Yamal player, when he scores a goal, signals the zip code of his hometown, in which half the population lives in poverty and 20% of the people are Moroccan, which is where his father is from. Okay. Anyway, because of that, he played when he was growing up in a gravel courtyard. So he grew up playing soccer on a gravel courtyard, which is quite something, I think. Not growing up myself playing soccer, but playing on gravel. What if you fall? Okay. Well, anyway, so but the point here is that the name of the gravel courtyard that he played on is Joan the 23rd. I don't know who that commemorates. I don't know if it's relevant. It may be. But the name of the courtyard where he grew up playing soccer, which he points to after every goal he scores, supposedly, is Joan 23rd. Well, this is also the 23rd World Cup. And that's amazing because of everything we have talked about here, which is how all this points to the mark of the Antichrist that will promise immortal life, etc. But the mark of the Antichrist, the reason why it is a mark, the reason why the VACCINE is the mark of the Antichrist, is that it marks people's 23 pairs of chromosomes, as in 2 23s, as in Courtyard Joan 23 and the 23rd World Cup. That is the prophetic significance of the Lamine Yamal guy, the other player, who is now 19 years old and wearing jersey number 19, whom Messi bathed as a child when he was 19. 19 again being the other jersey that Messi has played in the World Cup. So 23 and 23 pairs of chromosomes. Another thing too is that this World Cup final on July 19th, the 19th of the month, this World Cup that will be won by player number 10, Lionel Messi. So the 19th of the month and the number 10 is another 9/11. This World Cup will be exactly 119 weeks, as in 9/11, after that eclipse that I mentioned. on April 8th, 2024, that traversed across America and engendered a giant X when it crossed the path of the eclipse about 7 years earlier in 2017. An X is the Roman numeral for the number 10, the jersey number Lionel Messi wears. So let's go back to the beginning. We have the last American on the moon connecting with exactly 8 plus 8 plus 8 years, which hints at Jesus, as I explained, and so does the moon. And America's last time on the moon, it's the last astronaut to depart the moon symbolizes America's departure from Christ. And then 8 plus 8 plus 8 months or years later, we have the release of the movie Evita, as in Eve, who was told the lie, "You shall surely not die." Evita, the movie, portrayed by Madonna. And then another exact 8 plus 8 plus 8 years to the first American, as in the last American to depart the moon, the first American to take the mark of the Antichrist on December 14th, 2020. That day, once again, was the day of the eclipse in Argentina that went over Buenos Aires, the home of the first of the two Antichrists. And that day was the midpoint of the X that was engendered over America with the two eclipses. And X's are about their midpoint, which points to the middle date, which was also, coincidentally, the middle date of the Feast of Hanukkah that year. That date then gets us to the final eclipse, the second one, as in twin earthquakes, as in two antichrists, as in the two twin pups, breastfeeding on the wolf that represents Rome, as in the two World Cups that Lionel Messi will win, that will point to Rome, the harlot riding the beast, Madonna doing the halftime show. All right, that eclipse, April 8th, 2024, the second of the two eclipses, as in two World Cup wins for Lionel Messi in Argentina, is exactly 119 weeks before this World Cup that will be won by Lionel Messi, who came into the tournament with 911 goals. And again scored his record-setting 19th goal in the 80th minute of the game, and he was born 80 days before 9/11, and on and on. His two jersey numbers, 10 and 19, 9/11. Him wearing 10, Lamine Yamal wearing number 19, 9/11. And his son, which is what the photo points to, who was born exactly 11 years after 9/11. When Flight 11 crashed into the Twin Towers, it looked like a giant 11, as in the Twin Towers, as in the two World Cup victories that Lionel Messi will win, as in the twin earthquakes. As in the two 23s. Lamine Yamal playing in the courtyard that he points to after every goal, named Joan 23rd, and it being the 23rd World Cup because of the two pairs of 23 chromosomes that are marked with the mark of the Antichrist, which makes a person marked. Because of the begins with an MR and ends with a NA thing, VACCINE, that instructs one's cells to produce through their chromosomes, instructs our cells' chromosomes to produce the protruding amino acid chain on the outside of the cell, which causes the body to attack it. Here's the thing, though. That protruding amino acid chain, and you know what I'm talking about, right? The SPIKE thing, protein. It is synthesized snake venom. The serpent that deceived Eve, as in Evita, as in Eva Peron, as in Madonna, is the biggest symbol in the Bible for Satan, for evil. And that's why the CVD disease is in fact a chimera that is a bat virus with snake venom attached to it, which is the protruding amino acid chain, which gives us the VACCINE that mimics it and instructs one's cells to produce it indefinitely. Studies show that these people are still producing them in their cells, which causes a person's chromosomes to be marked, as in with the giant X. Which is why it is blasphemy and no longer a creation of God's. Now, don't get me wrong, or rather I should clarify that nowhere in the Bible does it say that one cannot repent after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. And I'll just end it with this. I want to emphasize again that I know far, far, far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction for Paul Simon 7 days after this World Cup. And it is to prove to you the controversial things that I am saying. There is no debate, zero discussion at all regarding these controversial things. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship or a supposed new age of dispensation that follows the rapture of all quote-unquote Christians. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is it is in fact judgment for this particular doctrine that is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And again, the prediction that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head on July 26th, after it is predicted that Argentina will win the World Cup 7 days earlier, as in the album Seven Psalms, and Paul Simon's best-selling album, the seventh one, Graceland, which is a mansion located where the eclipses crossed each other. It will prove all of the controversial things that I have just stated. God bless. I should probably add or leave this video with some explanation for how Paul Simon is connected to this. I've alluded to it. I'll just add a couple more things, though. This World Cup will point to Psalm chapter 2, which begins with, "Why do the nations rage?" This chapter is a prophecy about the Messiah, Jesus, and it is about the world ganging up on Israel at the end of the age, as in right now. Why do the nations rage? The World Cup. It points to Psalm in the Bible, the book of Psalms, chapter 2. And Simon received a prophetic dream to produce his recent album, Seven Psalms, which in all interviews he speaks of the dream and shows often the framed piece of paper on which he wrote after the dream. The voice in the dream instructed him to make the album and to name it Seven Psalms. There are many, many reasons for knowing that Paul Simon will fall on July 26th. One of them is that it is 7 days after this World Cup. And Paul Simon, and as I have explained, this World Cup is about 9/11. Paul Simon symbolizes 9/11. He's from New York City. He sings about America. He has two famous songs, America and American Tune. He cold opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11. With the song The Boxer. Boxing is about striking people in the head. Paul Simon will fall and hit his head. He will later die of this brain injury, just like the king, Elvis Presley, died after hitting his head in the bathroom of his mansion. He died years later. People don't know this, actually. He died not because of drugs. The drugs were a symptom. He was taking the drugs to compensate for his brain injury that he had suffered in March of 1967, I believe. Anyway, the king, Elvis Presley, lived in the mansion in Memphis, Tennessee, which is named after Memphis, Egypt, which is also located in the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, which is where the eclipse peaked and where the two eclipses crossed each other. The second one crossed exactly where the first eclipse peaked, by coincidence, over Cairo, Illinois. Little Egypt. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist. American Pharaoh, the horse, was the first Triple Crown winner in 444 months, which hints at the 44th president, who is the Antichrist, the American Pharaoh. Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's inauguration ball on the date 119, which hints at 9/11. He sang the song American Tune, which sings about Apollo 11. Earlier, I mentioned the connection between 11 and 17, but I didn't elaborate. Apollo 17 was the last time an American was on the moon, but Apollo 11 was the first time that an American was on the moon. And again, the moon symbolizes Christ. Paul Simon sang at the inauguration on the date 119, which is at 9/11, and he sang about Apollo 11 9 days before Stephen King released his book, The Shining. The Shining is about demonic possession. This demonic possession of those who will take the mark of the Antichrist and have taken it will be through people's brains, through frequencies, which is what music is. Frequencies that will trigger the components inside the people's brains that have been put into them through the things, the VACCINEs, that will then engender delta brainwaves, which will engender demonic possession of these people. Which is why the first lyric of the famous song Graceland on the album Graceland begins with the Mississippi Delta, Mississippi being the 9 plus 11th state to join the Union. The Mississippi Delta was shining, as in the book The Shining, about demonic possession, and a hotel, like a mansion, like Elvis Presley's mansion. The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The Mississippi Delta, as in delta brainwaves, shining, as in like demonic possession, as in through the brain, which is why Paul Simon will fall and injure his brain on July 26th. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. through Christ's ransom payment. A Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.